It is just a day before Daima comes out. After 6 years of no Dragon Ball series, we are almost there. And haven't I have some thoughts about it? Now, some of you may see Daima on October the 11th, while others might have to wait until the following week. Some people might have already seen the first episode during the special showcase event, where Akira Toriyama expressed his desire to keep the series well and truly alive, teasing the bright future for the anime, despite the tragic departure of the series creator Akira Toriyama. Around the same time, we were informed that Aoni Productions is going to work with Masako Nozawa to create AI versions of her voice to serve in applications and robotics with voice-related features and non-acting related pursuits. Now, the cynics in Haven't I make us question, for how long, huh? But we don't want to start on a grim manner, no. In fact, this might be the biggest time for celebration since Super found its footing, as it seems that we are getting a movie-quality series and there is a lot of stuff to be excited about. Whilst you're, of course, playing Sparking Zero. That released a few days ago as well, and that going global, and wow. And whilst the series may be on the shorter side, according to Toei's Latin America's licensing director, it's going to be about maybe 20-ish episodes or something. It's still the most official first-hand Dragon Ball content that we've got in a while, and Toriyama's farewell with us as far as we know. And hey, 6 months of content is better of 6 years with no series! But then there are lots of questions to be had. We don't know what Toriyama left behind him, finally. Did he make any notes? How long was he aware of his illness? Well, maybe some of his words seem to give off a sad undertone, like he might have known something was coming. And was that really a priority at that hard time to make stuff? It depends. These are not the questions we're going to be asking today. I mean, well, not really. This isn't really the time and place to do that. But you know what? It is kind of funny, as while Akira Toriyama was already a pretty accomplished mangaka when he created Dragon Ball back in the 80s and could kind of expect that the series might continue to be successful for a few decades because, the tournament arcs really did well, I do wonder what his reactions were on it becoming a world phenomena outside of Japan. I think part of him might have been rather surprised. There is something really interesting about its apparent carefree relation with the series and him simply calling himself lazy, being self-deprecating, where really, most of the examples of this apparent behaviour were made due to him wanting bigger efficiencies and not really wanting to have his workload run away from him. Because almost 10 years ago in the Dragon Ball 30th Anniversary Super History book at the end of the interview, he gave this answer. My policy is to try and forget things once they're over, since if I don't discard the old and focus on what's new, I'll overload my brain capacity. I still haven't lived down who the heck is Tao Pai Pai, that one time I was talking with Eiichiro Oda-kun. But the fact that there are still people reading the series after all this time, all I can say is, thank you, really, that's all. But we do know that this isn't the complete truth, not quite. A lot of the ideas he had back in 2014, namely Hate It or Love It minus, have surfaced in one way or another in the series. And it does seem that Daima will follow some of the earlier trains of thought that he might have had whilst he was working on Z. While it does seem to call some credit to the people that had worked on the Demon Realm for the supplementary materials around the main series, the Heroes verse mostly, they seem more like they are acknowledging tributes, at least for the time being. Maybe it was Iyoku bugging him about all of this kind of stuff, but to us, that seems unlikely. It's clear that, especially in his later years, Dragon Ball has been on his mind more than he was willing to admit. And that was the thing with Toriyama. He was so good at channeling this carefree, lackadaisical attitude that many people never questioned it. He just did his thing. So now we are going into that leap of faith, this final, as far as we know, installment that came directly from him. And what can we expect? Obviously, the moniker Toriyama's GT isn't completely out of place, just how DBS Broly was Toriyama's, well, Broly. Due to a conspiracy, Goku and his friends are turned small. In order to fix things, they'll head off to a new world. That is literally the tag that we got for so long. And the question is, though, do we really need more now we've got more? Honestly, we know that these elements will have some sort of unique spin, and while it is a fair judgment that the recent animated projects in Dragon Ball do rely on nostalgia a lot, a large part of the fandom attributes this to Akira Toriyama's influence, no doubt, they were competent, and a lot of the stuff they tried were being dressed in different robes to the point of some decontextualization. And honestly, as divisive as GT is, groaned upon by many, while beloved by a significant part of the fandom, it has one trait that we have been mentioning to death on this channel. It gave up way too soon on the prospect of an adventure, of a proper journey. It tried to revert to what Z was before allowing this aspect to find its footing. You know, after 16 episodes. And it does seem that this is going to be the main appeal for Daima. We might see this idea go through to the end. Well, I mean, that and power scaling. If we understand the premise correctly, our heroes might have had to have their powers scaled down in order for the demon realm to be threatening at all for them. After all, it was said that at this point, Kaioshin's were in a better spot power-wise, and, you know, Shin wasn't that mighty all things considered, but hey, enough memes about the poor Supreme Kai. He's already had enough. He's getting his time to shine after all, so good for him, honestly. Now, it's not that we hate the insanity of power scaling that is Dragon Ball Super, and from what we've seen recently, that isn't going away anytime soon. Daima's just going to be just its own thing, because reality-breaking scuffles can be fun. But there is something really, really exciting about seeing Goku with the power pole again, yeah? You know, just fighting mooks on the street like in the good old days, kung fu, action stuff. But wouldn't it be cooler to see maybe Goten do that instead? Obviously. But still, the upcoming series does seem like a labor of love. And the longer we think about it, the more we like the fact that this huge elephant in the room, the demon realm, is going to be explored as Toriyama had originally envisioned. Or how he came to envision it eventually. It will be interesting to watch. Which things from the old interviews and guidebooks still stand to this day, or were just left on the cutting room floor. And also, it's not just a simple, dreary, grim place. It has its fair share of zany and interesting inhabitants that just screams Toriyama. And you know what? That's neat, as far as I'm concerned. Obviously, not all of you will like Daima. That's probably inevitable. Dragon Ball is very fragmented these days, if you think about it, and every era has its enthusiasts and its opponents. It is inevitable with franchises as old as this, and of course being massive. Some people love the original the most, while others never got to experience it, being introduced to Z right away, myself included. Others don't make this distinction and go by the manga-style continuity, where for Toriyama it was just Dragon Ball. There is a lot of back and forth between GT and Super enthusiasts, and there are even voices that we as a fandom tend to overrate the series as a whole, or underrate. It depends on who you ask. The thing is that even if there are notes or directions for the future, this is it, folks. The final time we'll get to experience something like this that Akira Toriyama had direct influence on, shaped by his decisions. Decisions that, mind you, we as a fandom often question. It is easy to say this, bowing our heads in respect before the master, but let's be real. He had that playful, confrontational attitude to him throughout, and we didn't agree with his choices all the time, but we still loved what he did. Like, the point that we are trying to get across here is that every Dragon Ball era has plenty of things to love and plenty of things to criticize, and it's just the way it is. And as fans, we do have a tendency of attributing positive traits to the original stuff. It's true that, as we've said before, the original Dragon Ball didn't really have to try. Toriyama just went with the flow. But as Totally Not Mark has pointed out on more than one occasion, a lot of the criticism that applies to the modern era of the franchise would and should also be applied to what happened before. We really, really wish people will look at Daima with a fresh overview, as a tabula rasa of sorts, the new type of content, despite its obvious roots in some of the older ideas. This is the last chance of us, the fandom, to come together for this kind of project. It has a certain finality to it. In the future, we'll most definitely have more Dragon Ball content, yes. It might be good. Heck, it might even be great. But this is the end of an era that will never come back. And as such, we are calling out for open-mindedness. Don't reach any hasty conclusions and just let the series play out. To make hearsays affect your opinion the least, you know? Just give your own view on it. Especially since it's going to be available to a substantial number of people right from the offing. So it's not like Super, where you had to wait until episode 63 when it ended up on Crunchyroll. The sole purpose for this discussion is that the finality of it all finally hit us. that this is the project where we can really take a hard and long look at the entire franchise and re-evaluate it. Sometimes we underrate certain elements of the new series and set it up for impossible standards that were never really met. And at other times, we simply hype elements that, quite frankly, should be the norm at this point. But as little as we've seen from Daima, aren't we happy with its existence? I don't know if this is just some sort of copium, but the footage that we've seen is really ticking the boxes for a lot of elements of the series that we like. New worlds, wacky characters, interesting fights that aren't just beam struggles, new lore related to magic, you know, the stuff that we've been preaching about on this channel for a long time to include magic. That's why we have a soft spot for Moro. And again, it takes from some of the previous elements that were created without Toriyama's involvement. But in recent years, he has been around and has provided mostly good results. I know that the Bardock fans out there are rolling their eyes right now, still seeing the super version of their character as inferior, and that it is mostly due to the author seeing him in a new light, but you know us, we don't really care about Goku's dad all that much, neither do we see that as big of a difference, but we can empathize with you. But still, keep in mind that, to our knowledge, we will see mostly new characters and not adaptations of old ones, or ones we already know. We would be really surprised if Toriyama's version of Mechikabura or Demigra popped up in the series, but it's so unlikely, and they're not nearly as beloved as Bardock, that we should treat this new Demon Realm as a clean slate, instead of a hero's hack job. As to what comes beyond that, it's really hard to tell. Will Aoni Productions respect their claim to the voice of Nozawa and treat it well and fairly? Hopefully, yeah? Is the battle for the series' future over? For now, the more reasonable party in this scuffle seems to be Iyoko himself, whatever you think about him. At least he seems to be keen on honouring Toriyama's wishes and legacy, or what he thinks the author's wishes are. Yes, he's been called condescending, and rightfully so if you read some of his interviews, but in his position, if I've seen some of the ideas from Shueisha higher-ups, I might have been just as condescending towards them as Toriyama's right-hand man was. And again, so far, the stuff that we've got that he was attached to were at least good, if not pretty good. So, yeah, Team Capsule Corp Tokyo it is, at least for the time being. The future, though, is worrying and uncertain to some senses, not only just in terms of Dragon Ball, but for what it is worth, in the matter of a few days, we are going to have that one final goodbye from Toriyama seen across the globe. And we think it's currently better to live in the now than worry about the future. Kind of like how Toriyama did with his series, kind of like how he wanted Goku to be. So we hope that in the next few weeks, we are going to be discussing and theorizing about Daima just as much as we were with Super a few years back. We simply cannot wait, and we hope to see you all along for the ride. And until then, I shall see you in the next video, which will probably be a Daima Episode 1 review. Catch you later!